The reform movement of the distribution structure of farmed goods backed by the Park Geun-hye administration. Domestic companies are leading the way to reduce the distribution stages by relying more on local food and direct transaction of local farmed goods. What are the achievements of the Park Geun-hye administration's economic policies? What are some aspects to focus on in the future? Civil application service has become faster and more convenient as smartphones become widely used along with progress in ICT technology. We introduce the fast and easy administrative system. The Korean animation Larva has succeeded in expanding into the character market. What is the reason behind the success of the animation, which has also set a good example for the creative economy? The Park Geun-hye administration's North Korean policy is represented in the trust-building process on the Korean peninsula. We find out about the outcome of the South Korean government's stance on North Korea for the past 6 months.
Hello, I'm Andrew Salmon. Welcome to Bizline. We've got a special show for you this week because August the 25th marks exactly 6 months since the Park Geun-hye administration took office following last year's presidential election. What kind of economic policies have been implemented? How effective are they? These are some of the questions we'll try to answer in our features, which are coming in a moment. But before we go to those, let's first take a look at all the breaking business and economic news hitting headlines across South Korea this week.
President Park Geun-hye renewed her commitment to tackle skyrocketing rental prices. During a cabinet meeting, President Park ordered her cabinet members to work together with political parties to come up with regulations that could allow both lessors and lessees to make reasonable and predictable contracts. She vowed to put top priority on the matter during the latter half of the year. The Ministry of Strategy and Finance said that Koreans with financial accounts abroad worth roughly $900,000 will be obligated to report their overseas assets starting next year. Those violating the new rules will be hit with a fine of 10% of the total assets in their overseas accounts. The slumping economy at home and abroad has tamped down expectations for Korean businesses in the second quarter. According to an online financial information provider, FN Guide, 50 out of 93 listed companies that have announced their operating profits for the second quarter of this year reported profits higher than the market consensus.
Do you want to upgrade commercial efficiency? It's very, very simple. Bang, bang. Cut out the middleman. Now, a number of supermarkets and department stores are now doing exactly that by introducing local products and local farm products via direct transaction. And this is very much in step with the national government's policy of improving national distribution networks. The question is, how does this assist producers, retailers, and of course, consumers? Let's take a look.
Food prices are on a constant rise and increasingly becoming a burden to South Korean households. One of the reasons for high food prices is due to complicated food distribution channels and multiple steps taken to deliver fresh goods to the meal table. President Park Geun-hye has taken the matter seriously.
유통구조가 너무 복잡해서 산지나 산지에서 농업인이나 또 소비자들이 같이 고통을 겪고 있어요.
And announced measures to revamp food distribution systems which can financially benefit both the farmers and the general public. There are stores opening to practice such systems, directly connecting the local farmers with their fresh produce to the consumers in the region. At this local food store managed by the National Agricultural Cooperative Federation, farmers display their produce every morning, straight from the field, and consumers come here to buy food that is fresh and can be trusted.
이 로컬 푸드는 지역 농산물을 소비자한테 중간 마진 없이 주는 건데 아주 농업인들이 웃음이 생겼습니다. 그래서 이 아침에 보면 정말 가족같이 그렇게 자기가 생산한 농산물을 가지고 와서 진열하고 있습니다.
Customers welcome such a move as the cost to buy food is lower than before, as simpler distribution channels can bring down retail prices. On top of that, they know who the growers are as their photos are displayed along with the produce.
멀리 안 가고 또 좀 물건이 신선하니까 믿을 수 있어서 좋고 또 이제 우리 농민들이 열심히 일하니까 우리가 그거를 또 많이 소비해줘야 되고 그러니까 서로 믿고 사는 그런 데가 돼서 참 좋아요.
The food suppliers, who are also the producers, welcome the change as their income is better compared to selling through a middleman. Mr. Kim grows a variety of vegetables at a farm about 10 minutes from the food store, and he has been supplying his goods since April when the store first opened.
농민들이 로컬 푸드를 출하를 할 수 있는 그 기회가 굉장히 좋아서 이렇게 전량을 다 농협으로 출하를 하게 됐습니다. 중간 도매라든가 그런 게 모든 게 다 빠지니까 그래도 로컬 푸드로 출하를 하는 게 아무래도 매출이 더 낫다고 이렇게 생각이 듭니다.
Mrs. Park also supplies fresh tomatoes at the Kimpo store, which she says benefited her substantially.
일주일에 6만 원 정도 팔았는데 지금은 일주일에 80만 원, 90만 원 정도 벌고 있어요. 초창기에 시작할 때보다 지금 하는 거는 엄청난 액수를 벌고 있어요. 앞으로는 더 많이 벌겠죠. 물건도 더 좋은 거 내고 소비자도 좋은 거 드시고 저희는 이제 농가 소득도 올리고 아무튼 로컬푸드가 좋은 것 같아요.
This region was in much need of such system change because both the local farmers and consumers were at a financial disadvantage.
김포 지역에 보면은 이상한 구조를 가지고 있는데 전부 다 모든 생산된 농산물이 서울 가락동 시장으로 직결했다가 많은 유통 단계를 거쳐 가지고 다시 이렇게 소비자에게 전달이 되는 과정을 거치고 있어요. 그래서 그 여러 가지로 유통 단계를 거치다 보니까 가격도 비싸게 되고 또 물건도 싱싱하지 못하게 되고 물류 비용도 많이 들어가게 되고.
Through implementing such simpler distribution structures, farmers' income increased by 5 to 10%, while consumers on average save 10 to 20%. There are currently 5 local food stores nationwide, but due to such popularity, the cooperative plans to increase stores to around 20 by the end of this year. Local food isn't the only program that is trying to help food producers and consumers through a revamp in the food distribution system. The Korea Agro Fisheries and Food Trade Corporation is also working on programs to bring down the food cost by lowering the distribution cost, which takes as many as 7 to 8 steps.
유통 경로의 단순화 및 유통 경로 간 경쟁을 촉진함으로써 유통 비용은 약 15% 절감이 되겠습니다. 생산자는 5%의 수치 가격을 높일 수가 있고 소비자는 약 10%의 가격 인하 효과를 보게 되겠습니다. 또한 서민 생활과 밀접한 배추, 무, 마늘, 양파, 금고추 같은 품목에 대해서는 가격 변동률이 현재는 약 19% 정도입니다만은 앞으로 약 10% 정도로 가격 변동률을 낮춤을 해서 서민 생활에 안정적으로 참여하도록 하겠습니다.
Traditional distribution structure goes through as much as 7 stages, from the farmer's field to the consumer's dinner table, so the government is trying to shorten the stage to 2 or 3 steps. The National Agricultural Cooperative Federation also operates supermarket chain Hanaro Club, which is setting the standard in directly connecting the farmers with the consumers and shortening the distribution system.
일단 저희 같은 경우는 이제 직거래 활성화를 위해서요. 그 산지 조합에서 나오는 농산물을 직거래 이런 하나로 클럽에서 직거래 판매를 할 뿐더러 전국에 물류센터를 만들어서 지어서 농민들이 생산할 때 바로 그 물류센터 통해서 거점으로 나갈 수 있게 어떤 시스템을 단축하는 시스템을 지금 만들고 있습니다.
There are other mega store chains in the private sector that have also joined in on the efforts to bring food prices down by shortening distribution steps. They are setting up direct supply routes, such as constructing their own distribution centres. As such, the government measures to bring down food prices while increasing farmers' income at the same time is showing noticeable success in such a short period, only 6 months into the Park Geun-hye administration. There is more than 4 years left to her term, and more work to be done for the people. which already looks promising.
The honeymoon is over. The Park Geun-hye government has now been in power for 6 months, which means now is an appropriate time to assess the effectiveness or otherwise of her economic and business policies. To do so, we have two independent economic experts with us. No stranger to Bizline is Professor Shin Se-don of Sukmyung University. Dr. Shin, welcome once again. And a stranger to Bizline, making his first appearance with us today, is Dr. Tony Michel of the KDI, or Career Development Institute Graduate School. Dr. Michel, welcome to Bizline. Okay, good to see you both. Thank you for joining us. Let's start off with business policy. A key buzzword during the election has been economic democratization, the leveling of the playing field for smaller businesses. How would you assess, first, the Park administration's policy toward big business? Has the playing field in any way been leveled? Dr. Shin?
The government and the president's desire about the economic democracy has been in many ways challenged by the Congress because the lawmakers have a little different view about economic democracy of the President Park. So some legislation was able to pass the Congress, but most of the plan of the government has not been successful in passing. So as you said, this is about 1/10 of the government. So I think there's plenty of room for economic democracy to be legislated in the Congress.
Are you suggesting that the legislation which has been passed has been watered down during the political process?
In that direction, definitely.
Yeah. What are you talking about specifically?
Well, some of the malpractices of the big players has to be adjusted according to the law and the fair trade of the legislation. So the government idea, in order to leveling off some, the unfairness of the big players, has been tried in the legal process, and the government has been challenged by some oppositions, mostly from the opposition party, but some within the ruling party. There has been some, kind of resistance, so to speak. So there's a little bit of, confusion between the government and legislation, but I think this is the 1/10 of the government. So during the course of the government, I think the government will be able to make key legislation passed in the Congress.
Okay. Dr. Michel, how about yourself?
Well,
what's your sense on this?
I second what Dr. Shin says, that between the legislation and the government, there's a clear gap, and sometimes the legislation is more radical than the government, and is trying to pursue issues which probably are not in the best interests of Korea. As you know, I'm rather an admirer of big business in Korea when you consider its amazing success. And the question is, how can you raise small business without discouraging big business or driving it offshore?
Leveling the playing field and sort of cutting down the power of big business. There has been some legislation recently passed in terms of the big business field. Do you feel that legislation has been undermined perhaps by the Conservatives in Parliament?
No, I don't think so. Obviously there was a strong debate in Parliament between the two sides, but the key issue, we're talking about subsidiaries of subcontracting between subsidiaries of the Chaebol Group. And that is the key issue is what ratio of private shareholding remains in the subsidiary. That still has to be set by the administration. But on the whole, this legislation, while it sounded monstrous, will actually help to clarify whole business structures and organizations, where it's easy for a member of the family to start a new business and siphon off, if you like, unfair profits through that. And that will cease under the new legislation.
But who will actually be enforcing this legislation? As you say, the actual ratio of holdings has yet to be set.
Well, it will basically be the FTC, but one of the things that the government has done is to allow other bodies than FTC to complain about unfair trade practices. And that's really rather interesting.
In the sense of?
It allows more transparency and allows more competition where there is a clear abuse, but the FTC is busy looking in some other direction. FTC in the past has often looked in one direction at a time, but it allows other bodies to raise this and challenge it in the courts.
So fair trade will no longer be just the area of the Fair Trade Commission in the future?
Unfair trade will no longer be.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Let's move on to a second big issue, which of course is the major problem hanging over the domestic economy, household debt. If a person or a family want to start a business, they need money. With so much debt crimping domestic spending, this is really a very, very significant problem. Is this problem being dealt with by the current government, or is this something which is going to continue weigh on perhaps even into the next administration in 4.5 years?
In my opinion, we have to agree what is the real issue of the household debt. Okay, everybody knows the size, which is about 100% of GDP, and the real issue of household debt is not the issue of the integrity of financial institution or financial industry. Many people confuse if something happened in the household problem, entire financial system in Korea might collapse. That was not the real issue. In my opinion, the real issue, okay, is the interest payment. Interest payment on that household debt is about $45 billion, applying the 5%. So that is about 6% of entire household consumption. So the size of the interest payment on that household is too much. That's the reason why domestic demand is so stagnant for the long time. So the real issue is the real income of the household. That is the key issue. And the integrity of the financial industry is not the real issue. Okay. It's not the problem of the integrity of the household. Because if you look at the banking sector, the total size of the household debt is less than, I think, 50% of the entire asset of the banking system. So integrity of the financial system is not the real issue. I think the real issue is the interest burden of the private household. Yeah,
so it's a micro problem, not a macro problem. But
right.
Is this being dealt with?
Can I say when you get to 6%, then it becomes a macro problem because the size of it is sufficient to be a drag on total domestic private consumption.
Right.
Well, that's what we're talking about. Domestic consumption has been crimped as long as I can remember, and it seems to be getting worse rather than better. Is the government moving to deal with this problem? We're seeing debt write-offs, interest rate cuts.
Well, it's a very complicated issue. In the long run, a bit of deleveraging or of rising real income, whichever it is necessary. If it's deleveraging, it's a long process, as we've seen in the rest of the world since the global financial crisis. One of the things which the government, I think, is fortunate in, rather than being a policymaker on, is the fall in inflation. So that the fall of inflation has actually allowed a bit of room for the consumer. Consumer has chosen to pay off debt rather than to spend it. And now we see in the latest statistics that the rich have also delayed spending, partly so as they don't get tax inspections in this hunt for a black economy, which I think we'll come to in a minute. So control of inflation is very important in this situation. Lowering interest rates is important. And here I think the Bank of Korea could have been slightly more helpful by having an earlier rate cut, even before the new government came in. And at the back end, the people who are really at the bottom of society, the debt forgiveness process is beginning to start. But the real issue is that bundled into household debt is also small business borrowing. That's afforded at a global level of Basel II, but at the local level, you really don't know, has this man borrowed it to start a business or to run a business, or is it to buy a new car or something else? So that greater clarity would help policymakers know exactly what they ought to do.
Okay. Are you bullish? Do you think the government is taking the bull by the horns and is moving to aggressively cut this very, very heavy debt burden, which is such a heavy shadow over the economy?
Well, that is the dilemma of the government, because they know that the people in the government knows that not 100% of the household debt is unpayable. Because only the lower bottom, or the low income and heavily indebted households is the real problem. So should the government pay off all deleveraging? That's, I think, is against the principle philosophy. So the government is trying to solve out the problem of the at least the minimum the people which are incapable of solving. So other than that, I think the government should not do anything but providing more jobs and job opportunity to raise the income. So to your question, is the government doing enough for solving the problem? I think there's a limitation, at least in the philosophical sense. The government is not willing to pay all the problem households by paying the government money. So I think we have to wait, and the solution to that problem is going to take a long time. Okay. So we have to wish the better and improving economy, which will allow more job opportunities for the workers.
Rising incomes across the board.
Can I just say here that we have to think about what debt's for. If I borrow money to buy a house, I'm actually saving. I'm investing in an asset. If I borrow money to run a business and the business is successful, I'm doing a reasonable thing. It's if I borrow money to buy something that has no value, to pay my monthly expenditure. So we really have to separate this. We need longer term mortgages. We need credit cards to be, revolving credit cards to be supported, but with a higher minimum monthly payment. Because that's the way you can actually release some of the money that consumers have. So there are a lot of things which the government can still do, and I don't feel they've really got a good grip on it yet.
Okay. Korea has always been focused on growth. It is a growth economy. Growth in recent years has come down. We're now looking at around 2% for this year. Here's the question. Should the government be focused absolutely on growth, or should it perhaps be thinking, well, we've got a big agenda, we've got to raise taxes, we've got to start funding a welfare program, we've got to start cutting down the power of big business? What comes first? Should it be economic growth is the priority, or policy objectives and then focus on growth once those policies are in place?
My impression for the time being that the government is putting more emphasis upon economic growth. If economic growth is getting a little higher than 3% maybe, or 4%, then they would expect the higher tax revenues and more job opportunities. So everything seems to be turning good. So I think they're expecting more and trying to do more about economic stimulation. And of course, they're not saying that the government is not willing. I mean, they're not saying that they're thinking about raising tax. But they will keep going upon spending welfare program. But by the end of this year, we're going to face a huge government deficit unless we do something for the taxes. So by the end of this year, next year, if economic growth rate comes up to close to 3% or 4%, right? I think the government will keep going on the growth policy. But if it doesn't, and the economic growth rate less than 3%, huge tax, the tax revenue problem, slow growth, everything seems to be in disarray. So the latter part of this year, the performance of economic growth seems to be most critical for the government, and they know that, and I think they will try to do something to boost a little economic growth rate. I think that's the target of the government. So, to your question, growth seems to be still pretty, yes.
Yeah. Dr. Michel?
There is a limit to what government can do to stimulate growth when the economy reaches a size and scale particularly where that scale is private sector. So it's going to be very difficult to do very much, especially if the Bernanke bonus is going to tail away. If it was going to continue as we thought it might again, and the Bank of England new head suggested he was going to do the same thing as Bernanke, then we might have asked Bank of Korea to do something similar, which it's resisted doing. That's not possible, so there isn't much else government can do, honestly. So much of Korea depends on exports, and that depends on other economies which we don't control and where some unpredictable rough water may be starting. With domestic demand, I believe it will rise slightly for reasons that are given, and that will help real growth. In the end, there's a part of growth which is illusory from the point of view of the ordinary citizen. If we grow due to exports, very few citizens get any benefit at all. And indeed, the government doesn't get that much more revenue either. But if the domestic economy can be induced to grow, and that's jobs, new businesses, every kind of business, then we have a chance for a meaningful growth where you may only have 2 to 3%, but you feel like it's 3 or 4%. And that's what I think the government should be aiming at.
Okay. Well, final question then. You're both used to grading students. I'm now going to ask you to grade the government. What do you give to the Park government thus far in terms of economic policy? A, B, C, D, or fail?
There have been so many, mini polls and surveys about the performance of the new government. My idea is it's too early to tell. So
you're evading the question. What, Dr. Shin?
Okay.
Let me put you on the spot.
Okay.
What grade do you give the Park government?
In some
thus far?
courses, in some subjects, I will give A or A plus, especially the diplomacy, foreign affairs. So I think that she was pretty successful on that field. And in economics and the finance, so I think we have to see about, I would say, at least the B or B minus grade will be sufficient for us. So yeah, but we have to see. I think she has a lot of more room to improve her courses. I mean the grades, because this is too early to tell.
It is. Okay. Dr. Michel.
Yeah, I'm also going to give a B, but this isn't even a midterm. Remember, certainly not a final. And many of the things that have started, and started I think rather slowly, in the first 6 months will accelerate and will create, we hope, better results. So the final grade, as I say, it's not even a midterm, but if it were a midterm mark, you can still get A plus with outstanding effort by the time the final score is given.
Let's hope the final exam does indeed come up with an A. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being on Bizline. It's been very illuminating.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thanks for all your time. If you've got one. Are you watching carefully? I hope so. Because if you are, Bizline is about to save you a lot of time and quite a lot of trouble. Now, among bureaucracies worldwide, the term one-stop service is widely promised but rarely delivered. Technology, however, is at last riding to the rescue. If you live in Korea today, there's a whole range of government applications which can be downloaded onto your smartphone, thus obviating all those pesky trips to government offices and the long queues you often find there. Interested? I thought you might be. Let's take a closer look.
Smartphone, smart building. Smart seems to be the it word these days. The trend started with more and more people using smartphones and tablet PCs. And with the changing trend, the government is trying to get smart with the administration services provided to the public. Let's take a look at what the smart administration services the South Korean government is providing through the e-government. In 2002, the government opened a website called Minwon24 to provide civil administration services online, marking the launch of e-government in South Korea. Electronic government utilizes information technology, which not only increases efficiency in conducting administration work, but also provides civil service with convenience and speed.
과거 같으면 이제 효율성 관점에서 이제 주로 행정을 했는데 국민 입장에서 봤을 때는 국민이 필요한 때에 필요한 서비스를 정부로부터 받아야 되기 때문에 행정의 어떤 반응성을 높이고 그다음에 이제 국민들의 만족도를 높이기 위해서는 스마트 행정을 하지 않을 수가 없죠.
The fundamental of Korea's e-government lies on the Minwon 24. Every South Korean citizen can become its member, and by logging into the system, people can take care of civil affairs in the comfort of their own living room at any time. Not only that, by downloading the Minwon 24 application, people can use the service even on the go. Civil administration services provided on mobile have been increased to 36 items, and people can report change in address of residence or request university graduate certificates using a smartphone.
바쁠 때 출퇴근 시간에도 스마트폰을 이용을 해서 전입신고를 하면은 동주민센터 직원이 확인해서 처리하는 이런 시스템으로 바뀐 거거든요. 그래서 행정기관을 방문하지 않고도 정말 바쁜 사람도 출퇴근 시간에도 언제 어디서나 스마트폰을 활용해서 할 수 있기 때문에 아주 주민들의 반응이 좋다고 할 수 있습니다.
The number of administration services provided through Minwon 24 is on the increase. Currently, citizens can request some 2,933 administration services online and print out 1,166 official documents using the electronic service. What's more, the Minwon 24 services provided through the internet are free of charge. Minwon 24 is not just for the local citizens. It provides services in 7 other languages, including English, Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, and Thai, so that the foreigners and non-Korean speaking residents can conveniently use online services.
It sounds good. If it was available for me, I would download it so I could use it. I would rather not come down here and stand in line and do the paperwork. It would be much easier just to register on the application, through the application.
According to the Ministry of Security and Public Administration, more than 10 million people have signed up to use the Minwon 24 service. This is 45% of the people economically active in South Korea. This is an administrative agency which practices smart administration services for the public. To maximize government administrative work efficiency, they are implementing so-called smart office with information and communications technology. At the Gyeonggi-do Provincial Government Building Office, its office system is operated based on the cloud service, and the server is controlled at the control room. A traditional environment would have called for designated seating, but by implementing this smart office system, people can now come to work and take a seat of their own choice.
옆자리 동료가 고정된 것이 아니라 누구나 옆자리 동료가 됨에 따라서 직원들 간 협업과 소통이 활발해졌습니다. 개인 공간을 줄이고 회의실, 업무 집중 공간, 다목적 강의실 등 다 함께 사용하는 공간을 늘림으로써 업무 공간의 효율성을 극대화하였습니다.
There is only one printer in this office. In the past, a printer would have been needed for every 1 or 2 computers. But by implementing the cloud system, there only needs to be one central printer for common use. It is also possible to print through the internet connection using a smartphone and tablet PC.
이제 하나의 시스템을 이용하다 보니까 우선 공간이 넓어졌고요. 가서 내가 프린트를 할 때 내가 얼마나 개수를 했는지 체크가 되니까 불필요한 프린트를 안 한다는 이런 장점이 있습니다.
Through practicing e-government, smart administration within the government as well as services provided to the public, South Korea has ranked number 1 among 192 United Nations member nations in e-government survey since 2010. A merit in smart administration service is that it efficiently provides administration services.
요즘 이제 수거의 민주주의라는 말을 씁니다만은 중요한 정책 결정에서 정부가 이제 독단적으로 하는 것이 아니고 국민과 지속적으로 소통을 하면서 해야 되기 때문에 국민과의 어떤 소통을 활성화하는 차원에서 이제 스마트 행정을 하게 되면은 정말 우리가 경제도 발전할 수가 있고 민주주의도 더욱더 심화시킬 수가 있지 않겠나 이런 생각이 됩니다.
The smart administration that allows direct public participation and provides civil administration services anytime and anywhere. The future of e-government and its services with the development of information and communication technology looks promising, coming closer to the public for their own convenience.
Its episodes run at less than 2 minutes apiece. It's set in a sewer, and its heroes are these two little guys here, a pair of slugs. Yet global audiences cannot get enough of the sneaky, snarky Korean cartoon Lava. Since their debut in 2011, these two little fellows have earned over $9 million in sales revenues, and sales of merchandising are expected to reach into the hundreds of millions of dollars. With the Korean government hoping to promote the creative economy, could these two little guys provide a benchmark for further products and services? Follow us down into the sewer. Let's take a look.
The animation is not about a good character, nor does it deal with a story about good versus evil. But the Korean animation Lava is a story about two small caterpillars and their comical ordeals. The 90-second Korean animation Lava has swept the world and captured the attention of the world audience. Lava is a creation of Tuber Entertainment, a Korean animation company. The animation was launched back in March of 2011. The reason behind Lava's success was in its pure entertainment factor, as opposed to animations made under a global project or educational animations.
라바의 경우에는 두 애벌레가 나와서 펼치는 여러 가지 행동들, 행위들, 그 다음에 이제 약간은 엽기적인 그런 행동들이 사람들의 어떤 웃음을 이제 자아내게끔 하고
몸으로 이야기를 하는 거기 때문에 이해도 쉽고 받아들이는 것도 우리랑 똑같은 포인트에서 웃고 재밌어 하고 그래서 통하지 않나 이제 그렇게 생각이 됩니다.
Another key for Lava's success is in how it utilized the content. The animation took advantage of the fact that Korea is an IT powerhouse and publicized through new media, which soon became a success. This paved the way for the animation to enter the arena of digital synergy and TV broadcast.
영유아가 아닌 일반 청소년이나 아니면 성인들을 타겟으로 하는 어떤 그런 애니메이션을 만들려고 하다 보니까 시간대의 어떤 변화가 많이 필요했고요. 언제 어디서나 짤막짤막하게 필요할 때 짜투리 시간 이용해서 볼 수 있는 그런 타겟을 많이 저희들이 마케팅 활동을 했습니다.
The use of simple and yet comical content worked out as a successful strategy for Tuber Entertainment that led to its animation's global success. The Lava character is also very popular in the domestic animation character market, loved by all age groups. The Lava character product is by far the most popular item at one character shop we visited.
라바는 전층이 다 좋아하기 때문에 일단 사람들이 들어오면 애들부터 어른까지 다 물건을 이제 구매를 하려고 하고, 그리고 라바 같은 경우에는 그러니까 거기서 나오는 그 제품들이 굉장히 다양하게 많기 때문에 그게 큰 매출로도 같이 이어지고 있습니다.
The storylines are really simple, so everybody can enjoy it. Old people, young people, everybody can enjoy it. Their facial expressions are so bright and expressive and exciting, and you can really tell they're simple emotions.
The animation Lava is gearing up for its overseas expansion, selling its television rights to 40 countries around the world, and forming contracts with agents for the character license business in 14 nations. Backed by Lava's success, Tuber Entertainment's annual sales for this year are expected to reach $8 million and estimated to amount to $44 million next year. Considering that investment for the animation only took $3 million, the company is expecting a huge surplus.
라바는 저희 국내에서만 한정하지 않고 전 세계 글로벌 콘텐츠로 저희들이 키워나가려고 노력을 많이 하고 있습니다. 그래서 그 일환으로 저희들이 영화도 지금 제작을 하고 있고요. 그래서 성공한 어떤 글로벌한 콘텐츠를 통해서 제2, 제3의 콘텐츠들을 성공시킬 수 있는 그런 플랫폼을 짜는 게 지금은 저희들한테 가장 절실한 부분이고요. 그래서 성공한 콘텐츠가 3개, 4개가 넘어간다면 저희들도 충분히 글로벌한 그런 미디어 회사로 성장할 수 있는 그런 기틀이 마련되리라고 생각합니다.
Lava's creation and its appeal is expected to create bigger success for Korean animations, which have yet to become a strong genre. Lava has utilized the various contents of Korea's cultural arts sector and sets a fine example for Korea's creative economy.
기존에는 그 우리나라 애니메이션에 대한 부분이 그 영유아 애니메이션에 많이 이제 집중이 됐는데 이제 라바가 등장함으로써 이제 연령대 확대라든가 그다음에 그 다양한 형태의 어떤 애니메이션 성공 가능성을 보여줬다는 측면에서 상당히 그 중요한 그 작품이 아닌가 합니다.
Lava has captured the souls of worldwide viewers with the unique appeal of body language alone, without sound or dialogue of the main characters. The Korean animation industry is one step closer for major global success in the near future.
Hope springs afresh. After being closed amid military tensions in April, North and South Korean delegations, after months of hand-wringing, accusations, blame, counter-accusations, counter-blame, have finally agreed to reopen the troubled joint industrial park in Kaesong. To the outside world, reopening of an industrial park may seem like pretty small beer. After all, most governments are more concerned with nuclear weapons, strategic missiles, and human rights abuses. But here in Seoul, things are different. There are real hopes that this development may usher in the start, the belated start, of the trust-building process, which is a key cornerstone of Seoul's North Korean policy.
On August 14th, the two Koreas finally came to an agreement on the normalization of the Kaesong Industrial Complex, which has been shuttered since April after Pyongyang withdrew its 53,000 workers from the joint industrial park. The agreement included a guarantee that the current shutdown will not be repeated under any circumstances, and a pledge that both sides will actively seek ways to attract foreign companies to the site. The news, which followed 6 previous failed rounds of talks, is considered a major step forward in inter-Korean relations and a victory for the South Korean government's unbending approach towards North Korea.
Of course, it was quite tough and quite difficult negotiation process up to now. I think Park Geun-hye's position on the Kaesong Industrial Park has made a huge impact on creating new types of relations between the two Koreas by strongly demanding our request for North Korea's pledge for the prevention of the occurrence of the similar cases. I think it was very meaningful.
Earlier on the same day of the successful 7th round meeting, South Korea's unification minister Yoo Kil-jae spoke at a forum in Seoul regarding the government's North Korean policy known as the Korean Peninsula Trust Process or the Trust Politique process.
남북 간에도 사실 기본적으로 호혜의 원칙에 의해서 뭔가가 이루어질 필요가 있다. 그러기 위해서는 가장 기본적으로 신뢰가 있어야 되겠다. 신뢰라고 하는 것이 있어야 되겠다라고 하는 것입니다. 그것을 쌓자라는 것입니다.
Both previous progressive and conservative administrations' policies did not help inter-Korean relations. However, President Park Geun-hye has taken a different approach from her predecessors.
In order to induce North Korea to make the choice, the international community must speak with one voice. Its message must be clear and consistent. Only then will we see real progress in inter-Korean relations. Only then will lasting peace be brought to the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia.
박근혜 대통령은 과거부터 국민에게 공약한 것은 반드시 지켜야 한다라는 그런 소신을 가지고 정치 생활을 해왔습니다. 그런 국내 정치에서의 소신을 남북한 관계에 적용해서 이제 정식화한 것이 한반도 신뢰 프로세스라고 할 수가 있습니다.
The Park administration has also focused on strengthening ties with the U.S. and especially with China, resulting in the Chinese government's active implementation of economic sanctions against its communist ally.
우리 두 정상은 어떠한 상황에서도 북한의 핵 보유는 용인할 수 없다는 데 인식을 같이 하고 북한의 비핵화 실현과 한반도의 평화 안정 유지가 양국의 공동 이익에 부합함을 확인하고 이를 위한 전략적 협력을 지속해 나가기로 하였습니다.
However, even with such international support, it still is and will be very challenging to establish trust between the two Koreas.
68년 동안 불신으로만, 불신이 뭡니까? 적대적인 대결 관계에 있었던 남북이 신뢰를 과연 하루아침에 쌓을 수 있겠습니까? 한번 차근차근 처음부터 해보자. 그렇게 해서 우리는 신뢰를 쌓겠다고 얘기를 했습니다.
최근에 북한 노동신문을 보면은 과거 대남 비난에 할애됐던 그런 지면에서도 뭐 남한에 대한 비난이 완전히 사라지는 등 좀 더 이제 예의를 갖춰서 표현하는 등 남북한 간의 신뢰를 조성하고자 하는 그런 어떤 태도 변화를 읽을 수 있습니다. 남북한이 서로 노력한다고 하면은 신뢰를 축적하는 것이 어렵긴 하지만은 그것이 불가능하진 않다. 진전을 이룰 수 있다라는 것을 우리가 예상을 해볼 수 있을 것 같습니다.
Confident from the successful outcome regarding the Gaesong issue, President Park has proposed to resume reunions for separated families and establish a peace park in the heavily fortified border.
이번 추석을 전후로 남북한의 이산 가족들이 상봉할 수 있도록 북한에서 마음의 문을 열어주기를 바랍니다.
I'm a little bit optimistic about the separate family issue, but I'm very cautiously optimistic about the peace park, construction of the peace park and demilitarization, because it involves a legal issue and jurisdictional issue as well as a military issue.
Many hurdles and obstacles are expected, but these efforts are essential to mend the much aggravated inter-Korean relations and to build mutual trust.
남북이 함께 협력하고 서로 간의 이득을 볼 수 있는 그러한 통일을 원합니다. 평화 통일을 원합니다. 그러한 생각을 국가적인, 국민적인 의제로 앞으로 만들어 나가는데 정부가 앞장을 설 겁니다.
And looking back to the past 6 months, there is no doubt that President Park and her government will continue to stand strong through thick and thin and successfully carry out their trust politique process to help realize the people's long-cherished dream of peaceful reunification.
And that is all we have time for on Bizline this week. But do join us next week. We'll be investigating an immature market. And I mean that quite literally. What is the situation for baby goods here in Korea? We'll also be asking a sensitive question. How much protection exists for intellectual property in Korea today? So do join us for those stories next week. I'm Andrew Salmon. This was Bizline. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Goodbye.